Namasrestam manumapi sachiputra trasvarupam Rupam tasya grajamadupurim matrim gostavatim Radha kundam girivaramaho radhikamadavasam Prapto jasya pratita kripaya Sri Gurun tanmatosmi Mandeham Sri Guru Sri Jata Padakamalam Sri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Sri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitang Tang Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sri Krishna Chaitanya Sahitam Sri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Sri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Sri Vishakhan Vitangscha Om Ajnanatimrandasya Jnananjana Salakaya Chaksurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Nindantam Pulakautkarena Vikasam Nipa Prasunachchavim Prodrikritva Bujadvayam Hari Hari Ituchai Vidantam Muhu Nityantam Dutamashru Nirjara Chaye Sinchantam Urvitalam Gayantam Nija Parasadai Parivritam Sri Gaura Chandram Nama Ananda Lilamaya Vigrahaya Hemavadivyachchavi Sundaraya Tasmai Mahaprema Rasa Pradaya Chaitanya Chandraya Namo Namaste. Yes.
Maharaj, we have a question today from Gupta Govardhan. In the mundane world, the spirit of devotion is too often trod under feet by the spirit of exploitation. Should one
too often
trod? Tread. Trod.
Oh, trod. Trodden upon. Yeah.
The spirit of devotion is too often trod under feet by the spirit of exploitation. Should one resist, rebel, or fight back, or one should better remain nonchalant and quietly continue rendering own service?
Actually, I mean, the current of devotion, nothing can obstruct that. Sabai pungsang paro dharmo yato bhakti ardhoksaje ahoy tukya pratyata yayatma suprasidati. Causeless and irresistible. But we could say more to the point that, Guru Maharaj would frame it this way. There's the world of exploitation, renunciation, and dedication. And I've also related this to competing narratives. So, as Jiva souls, Tatastha Shakti, we have the, Guru Maharaj calls it adaptability. So that means we can go in the direction of exploitation, renunciation, or dedication. But what's referenced here is that mostly we're surrounded by incessant propaganda of exploitation, that you will realize your potential, so your potency, you have this potential, right? So it's competing for the soul's real wealth, which is faith, right? To believe in something. Like even in the world, people say, they want to believe in something, or, in conventional talk, people take, and it's true. They want to believe in something that is, gives meaning to their life, purpose. Right? But as Guru Maharaj would say, these competing narratives, there are also two currents. One is the in-caring devotional current, dedication, self-offering, self-sacrifice, and not toward anything, but toward reality, the substance and the world of dedication. Otherwise, people will observe that, the loyalty of, criminals in a particular organization, that doesn't qualify as devotion. Right? Like Guru Maharaj mentioned once that these three thieves, one in the mode of ignorance, one in the mode of passion, one in the mode of goodness, and they take this man to a remote place and rob him. And the thief in the mode of ignorance says, well, now that we've got what we want, let's kill him. And the thief in the mode of passion says, well, we've got what we want, there's no need to kill him, why don't we just let him go? And the thief in the mode of, it's a story, the thief in the mode of goodness says, we got what we want from him, and there's no need to kill him, but if we just release him here, he could get lost and harmed, so let's show him to the footpath, the road. Right? So, dedication to what? Toward whom? Right? So in-carrying current and the out-carrying current that's taking one away from their devotional potential. Because if the devotional potential is actually awakened substantially, we should say, then nothing can obstruct that current. Especially if we want to talk about raga bhakti, that even lower considerations in the devotional realm cannot obstruct that type of flow. What to speak of mundane things. So in essence, because it's a spiritual substance, that means that no mundane thing can affect it. Right? But I'm just choosing to answer it, and I think I understand what they're saying. And that's back to the point, that for the most part, we're surrounded by incessant propaganda of exploitation, right? Which I say is, in a word, humanism. Humanistic sloganeering is everywhere, right? All of the ads are humanistic sloganeering, right? As I've mentioned, Nike, just do it. Remember, they recruit psychology students from the best universities in their final year to work at these advertising agencies. And it was Freud's nephew who realized that the original propaganda was used for the war, for recruitment and national propaganda. But he's the first person who saw that how it could be used in marketing. But he realized, like, calling your agency a propaganda, that wouldn't be a good name for it. So he came up with another name, which was public relations. So he's the person who actually came up with that. But it was originally propaganda from war efforts. And to contrast the way that things were advertised in the 19th century, as opposed to this new way, in the 19th century it was, say for example, a hammer. And they would say the claw is made out of stainless steel or rust-proof, and the handle is made from the finest mahogany. This is a great hammer, it'll last a lifetime. So the emphasis was on utility. And then people would consider that and make a purchase. He's not the only one, but he was the leader in this major shift to appeal to psychic gratification, or desire. And knowing fully well that desire, like a page from the Gita, that it can never be satisfied. So he thought, if you can address that which can never be satisfied, then your possibilities are endless, which is another humanistic saying from, MasterCard. Master the possibilities. So he realized he could master the possibilities if he could appeal to that which in us is burning like a fire but can never be quenched or satisfied. So the shift was toward psychic gratification, which means, take the hammer as an example. So now the emphasis would be, when you possess this hammer, you'll feel like a real man, and women will admire you. Right? So they show the developed man with that hammer, and there's a woman off to the side looking at him approvingly and longingly. So then you think like, I gotta buy one of those hammers today. So when Nike says, just do it, if you unpack this, what they're saying is that voice of restraint, what Solzhenitsyn called serene voluntary self-restraint, right? And his world split apart commencement address at Harvard. Serene voluntary self-restraint. They're making propaganda against that. So in essence, they're making propaganda against sense control, because that's the only thing that might prevent you from making the purchase. We always want to awaken those desires that can never totally be satisfied. There's always one more thing that you'll have to acquire. Right? So when they say, just do it, they mean that voice of self-restraint, of the conscience that says, maybe you should control yourself or restrain yourself. Don't listen to that. Just do it, right? Because you want to, and you'll feel good. You feel good when you do things that you want to do. It's really base level appeal. So it's a simple phrase, just do it. But that's humanism. Saying, what is humanism? In essence, humanist eliminated God. Again, Solzhenitsyn. He calls it the disastrous deviation of the Enlightenment, where up to this point, you could say people were generally theocentric, with God at the center of their lives, saying, our relationship, duty and responsibility to divinity is the most important thing, and that will guide our relationships, our husband and wife, family, everything. Right? Humanism removed God from the picture and said, man alone is the sole measure of the value of all things. And again, as Solzhenitsyn said in his talk, he said, man who's full of, lust, anger, greed, envy, all these, unfavorable traits, qualities, characteristics, should be the measure of the value of everything and its utility, and whether it satisfies the whims of such a person. So, just do it. Right? I remember when I returned, I was in Russia in 1978, so I saw it one way, then I came again in the year 2000. And before, I've mentioned it, like if you, advertising, there was none. And like if you saw a bag of sugar in the store, it just was stenciled on it. What's the word? Zahar, That's what it said on it. Just a stencil smacked on, Right? When I came back in the year 2000, there was advertising everywhere. Even in places where in America it would be illegal to put an ad. You know, they had banners hanging across the street when there wasn't room on the sides. And from Sheremetyevo Airport to Koselny, or I saw, I don't know, I counted like 30 L'Oreal ads. The same, like every block there was a L'Oreal ad, right? And what is their motto? You know, because I'm worth it. Again, self-centered, you know, egocentric universe, as David Foster Wallace nicely put it. He said, kings or queens of our skull-sized kingdom. You know? So they're appealing to that. Why? Because you might think, those things are expensive, or, you know, and they're saying, no, you're worth it. You're worth every penny. Don't you have self-worth? Self-esteem? Don't you believe in yourself? Creative visualization. Whatever you visualize, that you can achieve. Right? It's another one, creative visualization. So, because I'm worth it. Right? And to me, and I've mentioned MasterCard. Right? Master the possibilities. Right? And then a card, it's like I'm a card-carrying master. Like when you own this card and carry it with you, and what does it say? You master, you become the master. That's humanism. That's why I call it humanistic sloganeering. Because these are all humanistic principles that have made their way into advertising. And it was no less than Arthur Miller, the playwright, wrote Death of a Salesman. He should have wrote Death of the Playwright, you know, because it more or less vanished, playwriting. But when he was asked, basically retired, and he's now left the world, but there was a time, well, let's say a little bit before that, the poet laureate, you know what that means? The poet laureate's like the top poet, intellectual of a country. It's not an elected position. The king or queen or the president or prime minister, they confer this upon someone who's considered enlightened. I'm going to use that word to just make a point. So, because Nadanam, Najanam, Nasundarim, Kavitamba, Jagadisha Kamaye. So, Nadanam, wealth, Najanam, followers, Nasundarim, beautiful women. The part that's not often given attention is Kavitam, poet. And Guru Maharaj references this in the Prapanna Jivanamritam, where he's in the beginning making this humble submission, like and saying in all the ways that he's unqualified. But as Rupa Goswami says, even if a lower person, you know, lights a candle, it gives light, and you know, it's very moving to see way Guru Maharaj says these things, and he says, I'm suffering from the practically incurable disease of insincerity. And I mean, we never think that of Guru Maharaj, but we see how perfectly he's approaching the subject. So before he presents everything, the Vaishnavas, this is their method of approach, and it's unparalleled in its beauty, that introduction section, Prapanna Jivanamritam. But one of the things there is, he says, also he said, what did he say? I'm seeking the prestige of a poet. Now, in the modern world, poetry, it's almost like, you know, a dead language, right? It's just, you know, not like high on people's list of like their favorite things. You know, they consider it, most students, a chore, a task. So, but what he means there is that, like the poet laureate, and England's really where that was strong in the 19th century. What it meant is, that was the person as said in English literature, the arbiters of truth. So they had the prestige in society as, I'm using this term, but as being enlightened. Right? So they thought, we want to take advice from the, well, I don't want to say Illuminati. That'll start like, like bounce all over the internet. Literati. Those who are illumined, truly. Right? So they're saying, so like Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, the Kshatriya kings, administrators, heads of government should take advice from an enlightened soul. Right? Thank you. Right? He's laughing at the Illuminati part. So, arbiters of reality, arbiters of truth, arbiters of reality, they said, actually. Right? Think of that. This is the person that you go to find out, to verify what's real, how to guide society out of ignorance towards the truth, how to give them, establish things in a way that's meaningful, purposeful, and beneficial for everyone. Right? So that the prestige of the poet, that's what he means. Not just someone who's good at the craft of poetry, but meaning that enlightened position, one who is, the consensus is that they're enlightened and to take direction from them. Right? So, in retrospect of the career of Arthur Miller, the New York Times interviewer saying to him, there was a time, and he's acknowledging, there was a time when went from poets and the great writers in the English language to plays and playwrights. So from the tail end of the 19th century into the 20th century, the playwright was a very prestigious position. They were the Kavirajas, the enlightened, the arbiters of reality. Right? And then it gradually diminished in the 40s, 50s, 60s, till it was just like musicals or things like that. Not to say there's anything wrong with that. But. So they're asking Arthur Miller about, so where do people get their answers now? Or when they want to understand how to proceed, or what should guide them in their lives? and he answered, like, honestly, he said, from advertising. Like, it's gone that far. He's saying people get their, what's the word? Direction. I can't, there's another word.
Guidance?
Guidance, direction. There's still inspiration. But he spelled it out. He said, from advertising. And I thought, how true that is. And it may have been upon hearing that I started noticing that wherever I went. But I thought the most blatant abuse of this, but just blatant humanistic carelessness was in the ad from this one company that their tagline was, total indulgence, zero guilt. They weren't just coaxing people in a particular direction. They're promising total indulgence, zero guilt. So when you think about that, first, who has the audacity to say that? They will say, as modern writers like to do, whenever they make a statement like that, oh, it's ironic, or we're being a little humorous or whatever. But the message comes through. They're always appealing to the base nature of people and trying to take them down, not to uplift them. Like when in the Bhagavad Gita, the famous verse, where is it, in the 3rd chapter, Krishna is saying to Arjuna, Indriyani paranyahur indriyebhya paramanaha manasastu parabudhe yo budhe paratastu saha. He's giving the, identifying soul and the soul realm, where it's located. And he says, first there are the objects of the senses. The things that can be seen, heard, taste, touched, felt, and so on. So then there are what we call, I guess, the working senses. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, etc. And then the seat of sense perception, the mind. It's an amazing thing, right? Through mental agency, we're using the working senses to perceive sense objects. Right? That's the situation. Like Hoffman, the cognitive scientist Hoffman, and his desktop analogy, the icons that represent certain things. Remember, the hammer ends up representing something that transcends its objective position or value, right? It becomes infinitely more valuable when its acquisition gives you, makes you a man, and makes you a man who's desirable to beautiful women. It's amazing that you can buy that for $9.95. So, the mind is the seat of all sense experience. Right? And that mind, we're told, like in Cheto Darpanam, is an instrument of reflection, like a mirror. And we know, whatever you put before a mirror, it reflects. It cannot decide not to reflect something. And that is unfortunately the situation. Right? You can't decide to turn off sense experience. Well, Parikshit Maharaj could, as he does at the end of the Bhagavatam. He's turning off the senses, or we find in Brihad Bhagavatamritam, and that's when Uttara, his mother, approaches him. Therefore, Mahayogi. But other than that elite, you cannot, and this is our problem. I remember when I was a teenager and I got the Revolver album by the Beatles, and the last song on the second side was by John Lennon, called Tomorrow Never Knows. And the first line was, turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream. And at the time, we thought they were like our gurus. This was some kind of a spiritual message. And I remember in my room, lying down on the floor, and I was gonna, light a stick of incense, and then I'm gonna turn off my mind, relax, and float downstream. But I couldn't get to the stream, nor could I relax, because I couldn't turn off my mind. And I just kept saying, no, but he just said, turn off your mind, relax, and float downstream. But this turning off the mind part, right? And so it's a mirror, like a mirror, right? It just reflects whatever's put before it. That's why we're so much dependent upon intelligence, right? Manasastu parabudhe, above mind. So mind is the seat of sense experience. And I should also say, just like in the conventional saying of being absent-minded, you're deeply absorbed in something, and someone's calling your name, and you don't hear them. right? If we set that up and filmed it and recorded it, we could prove that it happened, right? And if we had the scientific apparatus, we could show the liquids and the cochlea or whatever. Forgive me if I have the biology wrong, but you know what I'm talking about, and the hair, you know, the way sound enters. So we could prove it actually happened, and still the person can honestly, legitimately say, I didn't hear you. So the mind is the seat of sense experience, and incidentally, karma, right? Like a modification about 9/10 of the law, you know, intent, purpose is 9/10. That's how they decide criminal intent. There's no, and a karmic consequence is based on purpose or intent. There's no question of what took place, right? But culpability comes about intent, right? So, but above the mind, buddhi, intelligence, which we're generally told, the discriminating factor that can say, stop thinking like that, right? It's unhealthy. Or stop looking this way or that, or there's some inspiration for control, right? Or to discriminate between what is favorable or unfavorable. But this is where the difference between buddhi and dharma buddhi, right? Because according to what standard is it favorable or unfavorable? Favorable for exploitation, or favorable for dedication. Still, he's saying, yo buddhe paratastu saha. And he says, but the soul is even higher than that. So we were discussing this the other day, that it's inappropriate to just equate consciousness with the mind. Right? So the soul is that conscious agent with this adaptability for exploitation, renunciation, or dedication. Right? It's covered by a layer of ego, right? Intelligence, mind, and then a body of working senses, etc. Trying to navigate subjective subject trying to navigate the objective world, right? Who's being bombarded with humanistic sloganeering propaganda to try and acquire, control, and consume things that are lower than you as a means of realizing your potential, becoming fulfilled. Right? That something higher will fulfill itself by consuming that which is lower than itself. That's exploitation in a nutshell. And as we said, and on the spectral range of species, bodies, tamasa bahurupena, veshtita karma hetuna. Manu says, what's the cause of all these different life forms? Veshtita karma hetuna. Karma is the cause of your karmic dress. Right? Someone's as a human being, someone's in the body of a dog, a lizard, a bird. Right? Karma is the cause of that. And so then from that we gather, the body is the biological expression of the soul's delusion. Right? It's the biological expression of the soul's delusion. So in response to this, you go say, then what hope is there? This is the biological expression of your delusion, and you're in this world, and your soul's buried in the gross and subtle body, the mind, the intellect, ego, etc., trying to navigate the world of exploitation, where the rule is jiva, jivasya, jivanam. that one living being lives at the expense of another. You thrive here through exploitation. That's what it's saying. And not only objective Darwinian evolution, but the Bhagavatam saying the same thing. Right? That's the rule of thumb. I should say the rule of opposable thumb. The rule of thumb for the world of exploitation is one living being lives at the expense of another. There's that Bruegel painting, big fish eat little fish. I mean, he's taken it to an extreme, but and it has a comedic aspect to it. But you see all these fish of various sizes, and the bigger ones are eating the little ones, and there's another one eating that one, and so that's why it actually has some merit as art, because it's dealing with one of the big issues, which is not only mortality, but exploitation. So again, so what hope is there in the world of exploitation? So, but in the next verse, Krishna, what does he say? Evam buddhe samstabhyatmanam atmana something mahabaho yatedam yahama kamarupam darasadam. Right, saying. So the formidable enemy, kamrup, lust, desire, what elsewhere is called hridrogam, heart disease. Right? That the heart is infected with consumerism, which has been utterly saturated with humanism. So in this next verse he's saying, but if, like ascharjavat pashyati kashchidenam, if you have a glimpse, if you can reach the soul plane, have a glimpse of your soul and seeing what your actual potential is, your reality potential in the upper world, in the subjective world, you'll be astonished, you'll be amazed, you'll also be inspired, encouraged to move along this path. And the way Guru Maharaj renders that verse, he says, and remember, Guru Maharaj can say this with authority. He says, and then you'll realize these sense objects, that it's all trash. And then he says, trash, it's all trash. And then Guru Maharaj's poet kicks in and he realizes he just said the English word trash. So then he says, ash. As tasteless ash, you're like eating ashes and trying to, extract some ros from there, something flavorful or tasty. So some will conclude then, yes, as the visiting monks say, so don't try for the happiness of this world that only ends in frustration, disappointment, and suffering. What do you say? The consequence of exploitation, then the karmic reaction comes in the form of suffering. So just enter the neutral position. Just stop it all. And it may take a while to wind it, but just stop it all. But you might as well tell someone to turn off their mind, relax, and float downstream. If the soul did not, this is both it's like turning the bad news into good news. The soul has senses. Muktir hivanyata rupam swaropena vivastiti. The swarup of the jiva, when fully expressed, its dormant Krishna conscious potential has been awakened and expressed and realized, then there's the full spectral range of sensual possibilities. Seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, feeling, everything. Why I like the names Govinda and Hershey. Because Govinda is more obvious, I think. But if we, as Prabhupada used to say, go means indriyas, means senses. Govinda means the one who gives fulfillment to the senses. And that sounds a little stilted or awkward or non-explicit. And when we hear that, what does it mean? I think if you think about it more deeply, like, you see what our tendencies are. I've mentioned the word aesthetic, aesthetikos, the Greek word, which originally meant sense perception. In time, it's become equated with the cultivation of beauty, which is very good, because that will take us to reality of the beautiful, Krishna conception. Blake, if the doors of perception are cleansed, they will see everything as it is, infinite. Govinda, Hershey Case, who is the infinite? What is the infinite correlative of seeing, of hearing? So the most beautiful person to be seen, the most beautiful sounds to be heard, the things that we're hardwired to seek, except we're seeking them in the objective world as opposed to the subjective world. Rukmini, the Dwarka queen, when she's writing Krishna the invitation letter to kidnap her. This isn't a ransom note from the kidnappers, but it's a note inviting Krishna to kidnap her. And where it says, Srutva gunan bhuvana sundara srinvatam te nirvisha karna vivarai haratonga tapam rupam dasham dashimatam akilarta labam tvayachuta bishati chitram apatrapam me. That's from a Dwarka queen. Right? What did you say? Srutva gunan bhuvana sundara srinvatam te. So these same senses that we sound, we're helpless. We're in that world, the soul's buried under layers of acquired prejudice and acquired tendency and polluted sense perception. Then what? She says, Srutva gunan bhuvana sundara srinvatam te. Because he's Rishikesh, you can use those same senses to begin hearing about him, even in the midst of this endlessly distracting world. Right? So, Srinvata Swakata Krishna, Punya Sravana Kirtana, Hridyantasto Hyabadrani Vidunoti Suhritsatam. By continually hearing about Krishna, Punya Sravana Kirtana, you start accumulating more Sukriti, Punya Sravana Kirtana, Hridyantasto Hyabadrani, the impurity, that hridrogam, heart disease, starts becoming cured. All hearing about Krishna. But what does she say? When I heard about you and these descriptions, and they're there for us also, right? She said, then I could understand you're the most beautiful thing in the world. That's what Bhuvana Sundar means. Right? But then she takes it to another level and says, and then I understood why there is hearing, why we have the auditory sense. This is really profound. So from her perspective, she's saying, and if Sukadev in the second canto and Radharani and Madhya Lila around the second, third chapter, saying the same thing. Why would you use your ears to hear anything else? It's inconceivable to them, like Basu Ghosh and the Yadi Gorna Hoita Tabiki Hoita Kemanidari Tam Dehe Radhar Mahima Prema Rasasima Jagata Janatake, saying, if Gauranga had not come down, we would never know the greatness of Radharani and the limits, the heights of her Krishna Prem, her Mahabhav. Then why would we have lived? Why be alive? And Guru Maharaj says, but I noticed you were living for some time before you got this connection? Oh, in anticipation of this, you were living for some time. That's the only, they're so intense, that's the only way he can imagine that in anticipation of a connection with this. Then you could go on for some time. And if we would want to be generous, we could say we're living with that anticipation. We hope. So she says, so then I understand why we possess hearing. It's to hear about you, and we hear later the sound of Krishna's voice, the sound of his flute. Nirvisha karna vivarai haratonga tapam. Harata, the pop, the consequences of all of our misguided activities. Right? I want to use that word. Right? The suffering that is the consequence of all of our misguided activities. Harata, taken away. Right? Then rupam drisham drishimatam akilartalabam. And then hearing about you, as Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in the Sharanagati, Nam, Rupa, Guna, Lila, from when he says the holy name, people are talking about chanting japa, what is Bhaktivinoda talking about? When he's taking the name of Krishna, then some form starts to appear, and Krishna's form appears from that divine sound, and then reveals particular qualities, and then he takes him forcibly into his pastimes. That's when Bhaktivinoda Thakur is taking the holy name. So, Rupam. So she said, and see how it's consistent. Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying here, Rukmini here in the Bhagavatam. First, Shrutva, hearing. Why didn't she say it in reverse? No, heard about you. Then that means, and this is good news for all hearers of Krishna Katha and Krishna Kirtan through sound culture, Kalo Parama Upai, right? Nam Sankirtan Kalo Parama Upai. In Kali Yuga, you get everything through Nam culture, Nam Sankirtan, from sound, the form of Krishna. And you think, and then seeing you, and he said, Akhilarta Akhila Laba Artam. I think I've got everything. Bhagavad Gita, Yam Labdva Chapram Labham Manyate Nadikam Tataha. The so-called Samadhi sloka. And when you get this, it means Krishna. Not some abstract, dazed, immersion in unlimited light, right? Krishna, that unlimited light, Brahmajyoti is his effulgence. Krishna. So they're saying, when you reach this plane, you'll think that you've got everything. Manyate nadikam tataha, there's nothing higher than this. Rukmini, same thing. And then she says, Vam disham drishimitam akilartalabam tvayachyuta vishati chitram apatrapame. So I'm shamelessly begging you to kidnap me, which is what we should say. As she was, in a sense, inescapably surrounded by karmic circumstance, and she's realizing, only if Krishna kidnaps me, that can rescue me from this situation. So here, we're inescapably surrounded by all these things, saying, only Krishna can, and how will he do that? Through his devotees. What does it say in Aimana Durmati? He's Mahaprabhu, oh, I've got good news for you, my brother, that Mahaprabhu Sange Bhai Avaduta, Mahaprabhu Sri Krishna Chaitanya Navadvipe Avatar, he's come with the Avadut Nityananda, and they're taking many souls over, and he sent you to his Gurudev to rescue him. So what was I saying? Oh, about Hershey Case. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatparatena nirmalam Hrishikena Hrishikesha sevanam bhakti ruchate. So, what does it say? Sarva upadi vinirmuktam. When you've given up all the substitutes for Krishna, the persons, places, things of this world. When one girl, remember Malta Malini, the day she's going to leave India, like the next day, the day before, there was this cat at the Mat, and cats in India really have a hard time. You know, they're not considered auspicious, or, for the most part. So they're not used to human interaction. And she thought, oh, here, kitty. You know, and the cat was afraid, and she thought, oh, you know, I'll just pick the cat up and show I'm friendly, and you know. So she went to, and the cat bit her, like with its teeth, punctured the skin. So she had to go get tetanus shots. Rabies, that's it, rabies shots. And so she's, you know, like the day before she's leaving. And she comes back and her arm is bandaged like this, and she's now going to be, it's the next day, going to the airport and everything, and Gurudev's giving like his final, you know, parting instructions to her. And he said, do not be attached to anything, any place in this world, anything in this world, any animal in this world, or any human being. It ended with, or any human being. So, person, places, things. You know. Sarvapadi vinirmuktam tatparatena nirmalam Hrishikena Hrishikesha sevanam. Because Krishna has senses. Right? As I told that advanced computer scientist on the flight from Beijing, Air China flight, Beijing to New York. And he said he taught advanced computer science at one of the major at Duke University. So I said, oh, I have some theories. Can I ask you a couple of questions? You know, and he said, sure. And I said, like I was thinking of, well, here, these are jasmine, but the champak flower, plumeria, lilavati, you know, it's various names. And so I was saying, the flowers, they have so much beautiful aroma, you know, mind-altering, consciousness-altering aroma, right? Mood-altering. And they're soft to the touch, they look very beautiful, so many sensuous aspects. So I said, can you say with absolute certainty that the original source of all wonderful aroma that you enjoy, I enjoy, you know, the bees are attracted to the flowers, and that's more of a visual thing, but anyway. I said, can you say with absolute certainty that the original source has no olfactory capacity? That the original source of all aroma, as we have olfactory capacity, we can smell and appreciate this, has no olfactory capacity to smell and appreciate. And he was honest and said, you qualified it by saying, can I deny that with absolute certainty? No, I cannot. And I said, well, then I don't need to ask any more questions, because I can reframe this question for each one of the senses. And what you've done is you've opened the door, those doors of perception should be cleansed. You've opened the door for theism, that the original source of everything is possesses senses. Rishikesh can see, hear, taste, touch, smell, feel. Right? And what would be the difference? You know, infinite seeing, infinite hearing, infinite on both sides of the equation. He is the infinitely beautiful, and those who appreciate that are experiencing infinite beauty, which we, by our nature, are hardwired to seek. Pratyanga lage khande pratyanga more. In the words of Srimati Radharani, that Krishna alone can reciprocate every atom of every soul's hankering. And we add to that simultaneously. That's the position of the Absolute, and cannot be anything less than that. So in what Sukadev said earlier in the Bhagavatam, the eyes that don't look at the divine form of the Lord are like the eyes on a peacock plume, and tongues like frogs, ears like snakes. He went through all the different senses saying, it's frightening when you hear it. It's scary. Right? But I used to think, well, maybe someone would say, you could expect that from a brahmachari preacher, like Sukadev Goswami. But in the Madhya Lila of Charitamritam, Saraswati Thakur, it's in the section where Radharani is saying these things, and they're even more intense. Right? More condemning from her. Right? And what that tells us is how, indirectly, how beautiful, sweet, charming, the aroma of everything about Krishna. But then what do we, when Krishna, raises his hand and they go, Krishna, now you can speak. Right? After all these devotees said all these wonderful things, then Krishna is saying, but who can do, I do this for you. Yes, I'm Govinda and I'm Hershey Case. But who's Govinda Mohini? For what I do for you, who can do that for me? But someone who's equally or more qualified. And then he goes through all the different aspects of the senses and saying, she has that effect upon me. So one of her names, Govinda Mohini, Govinda Nandini. She gives pleasure to Krishna. So, in conclusion, Aradhya Bhagavan Brajesha Tvanayas Tadama Vrindavanam Ramya Kachit Brajabidu Bhargena Ja Kalpitai Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanamamalam Prema Pumarto Mahan Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Matamidam Tatrapi Napara. So Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur says in a nutshell, there's no superior worship or path than that which was, in Guru Maharaj's words, invented by the Braja Gopis. The way for us to get out of this predicament and to go in the direction of the domain, they demonstrate themselves. Tava katamritam tapta jivanam kavipiriditam kalmasham. By hearing about Krishna, talking about Krishna, with these very same senses, right? That atak Shri Krishna namari nabhavye graham indriyai. Krishna cannot be perceived by the eyes, ears, etc., and including the mind. What? And he says, Sevan mukhe hijavaro. So the Nam, Rup, Guna, Lila of Krishna are beyond the reach of the mundane senses and mind. But the same senses, mind, when Sevan mukata, infused with the current of seva, Shayameva Spurtida, revelation of Krishna through hearing, seeing, tasting, touching, smelling, feeling, the full sensual experience. So, this Aradya Bhagavan Brajesa Tadama Vrindavanam Ramya Kachit Brajavadu means the Brajagopis, Bharga, Brajavadu Bharga, their way, their path. So, Kalpita means the way they think, what they imagined. Gopi imagination. Have to transition toward Gopi imagination. Right? Gopi mind, Gopi bhav, heart of a Gopi. Right? Then what does it say? So how does Guru say that? Then you say, like, do you expect us to believe this? What's the evidence that what you're saying is true? I mean, with all due respect. And it says, Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanamamalam. The Srimad Bhagavatam is the evidence for that. It's the Pramanamamalam means pure, perfect, spotless, untinged evidence. Right? It's not slanted, it hasn't been modified, it has no ulterior motive. It's the ultimate, supreme, absolute truth. Srimad Bhagavatam Pramanamamalam. And what is the message given there? Prema Pumarto Mahan. Normally it is Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. No, here, the fifth, Prema Pumarto Mahan. Excuse me. Prem, Krishna Prem, love. Love, Krishna Prem is love. Love is Krishna Prem. They're not two different things. Krishna love is love. That's actually what we're searching for. Right? And the Bhagavatam is giving the evidence to support the position of the Brajagopis, right? Whose nature is to, their way, their marg, is to give themselves. Right? Bhajaniya Sarvasad Guna Vishishta, Bhagavan. The pure devotional response to genuine Krishna conception is to offer yourself in service. That is their way, and that is still the way. That is the way presently. So saying, so the exalted, most super exalted position of the Brajagopis, the evidence, it's established on the basis of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then Guru said, well, and then how did you come to know this, or how can one come to know this? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Matamidam. From Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He's descended with the Avadut to bring you this good message, and to take many souls like us across the ocean of nescience, ignorance, misconception. So, to conclude, conclusion number 2. As Guru Maharaj does say, a poet said, man is higher than God. You know? And you think, it sounds like classic humanism. You know, God being the imagination of, ignorant people who can't explain why there's lightning. You know? I think to disbelieve in God is the ultimate failure of imagination. But, so he said, man is higher than God. And the way we adjust that is, Krishna Rajatega Kela Sarvatam Narlila Narvapu Tahara Swarup Gopavesh Venukar Navakishore Natabar Narlila Hoyanurup. Yes, the human-like pastimes of Krishna are superior to the Aiswarja, the majestic pastimes of divinity. That's why human-like is higher. then it's a beautiful thing because it reinforces Krishna conception, right? The central conception of the infinite, the golden mean of the infinite, that at the center is the supreme personality of Godhead, reality of the beautiful. Hare Krishna. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Nama. Hari Haraya Nama Krishna Yadavaya Nama. Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha. Yadavaya Madhavaya Keshavaya Namaha. Gopal Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudan. Gopal Govinda Ram Sri Madhusudan. Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan. Giridhari Gopinath Madana Mohan. Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra. Sri Chaitanya Nityananda Sri Advaita Chandra. Garadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Garadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jai Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath. Jai Rupa Sanatan Bhatta Raghunath. Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath. Sri Jiva Gopala Bhatta Dasa Raghunath. Echai Gochai Kori Charana Bandhan. Echai Gochai Kori Charana Bandhan. Jaha Hoite Vignanas Abhishta Puran. Jaha Hoite Vignanas Abhishta Puran. Echai Gochai Jar Mui Taro Das. Echai Gochai Jar Mui Taro Das. Kansabara Padarinu Mora Panchagras. Kansabara Padarinu Mora Panchagras. Tandera Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanevas. Tandera Charana Sevi Bhakta Sanevas. Janame mor ei abhilas. Janame mor ei abhilas. Echai Gochai Jabe Bhaje Koilovas. Echai Gochai Jabe Bhaje Koilovas. Radha Krishna Nitya Lila Korilo Prakash. Radha Krishna Nitya Lila Korilo Prakash. Anande Bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan. Anande Bolo Hari Bhaja Vrindavan. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Bhajayam. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pade Bhajayam. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koriyas. Shri Guru Vaishnava Pad Padma Koriyas. Harinam Sankirtan Koe Narottamara. Harinam Sankirtan Koe Narottamara. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Acharya Satar Sata Shri Srimad Srila Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Srila Bhakti Rakak Sridhar Dev Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Bhagavan Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Ki Jai. Jai Saparikar Sri Sri Guru Gauranga Gandharva Govinda Sundar Jiu Ki Jai. Shri Giriraj Govardhan Ki Jai. Sri Rupanuga Guru Varga Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gop Govina Shyamakunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navadip Dham Ki Jai. Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Ki Jai. Sri Gupta Govardhan Ki Jai. Ganga Devi Muna Devi Bhakti Devi Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Om Vishnupad Vishvavarenya Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat Acharya Brinda Ki Jai. Jai Srila Bhakti Bimala Avadut Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Srila Bhakti Ranjan Madhusudan Maharaj Ki Jai. Jai Sri Bhakti Lalita Devi Dasi Ki Jai. Seva Brinda Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhakta Brinda Ki Jai. Nitai Go Premanande.
Jai Mr. Bhakti Bhakti Sudhir Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai.
Hare Krishna.
And Maharaj.
Yeah.
Dandavas from Dhananjay Prabhu, Siberia. Suchitra Didi, Vijay Krishna Prabhu, London.
Hare Krishna.
Murari Mohan Prabhu, Sevarupa Didi, Mexico City. Tarulata, Minsk. Dhananjay Prabhu, Italy.
Hare Krishna.
Bhanavi Didi, Ajita Krishna Prabhu, Russia. Jyotirmoy Prabhu, Sundar Gopal Prabhu, Brazil. Arjun Prabhu, Odarya Leela Didi. Ratim Prabhu, Moscow. Leela Sundari Didi, Australia. Dandavats Goswami Maharaj and listening devotees. Then Gaurashakti Prabhu, Adelaide, Australia. Dandavat pranams to Srila Bhakti Sudhir Goswami Maharaj and all the devotees of Gupta Govardhan, unquote. Shri Haridas Prabhu, Brazil, quote, Dandavat pranams, Jai Srila Bhakti Sudhir Goswami Maharaj, Jai Srila Gurudev, Jai Srila Guru Maharaj. My humble and sincere thank yous to all devotees at Gupta Govardhan for your great seva. It's great to be able to watch life from the other side of the world. Hare Krishna. Srila Goswami Maharaj's incomparable sense of humor turns very elevated and sometimes even heavy subjects so pleasant and even fun to hear. I'm laughing a lot today and of course learning a lot as well. What a great Vaishnava. Hare Krishna.
Hare
Unquote.
Krishna. Jai. Vancha kalpatruyascha kripa sindhu bevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.